Hey, what's going on, DDO players? Axel here. So, saw this thread on the forums and thought it was worth talking about. So, the thread is called Remove All Flagging, and this is what the poster has to say. Flagging needs to be removed from the game. It makes no sense whatsoever. The only purpose it serves is to make it more difficult to form groups when some have not yet done the first quest or the first chain or the flagging quests. All right, so flagging, interesting topic to talk about. So, for those of you who don't know, if you're a new player, flagging is the requirement to run certain quests before you can do others. So, most notably, this is done with raids. So, for example, with the Ravenloft expansion, for example, you have to run all of the Ravenloft quests. So, that's Death House all the way through to the end in order to be able to run the Curse of Strahd raid. This varies a lot in the game. So there's some quests that don't require any flagging. So, for example, also in Ravenloft, you have Old Baba's Hut. That raid does not require any flagging. So it doesn't matter if you've not completed any of the Ravenloft quests, you can go ahead and still run Old Baba's Hut. So in the past, there's been more flagging requirements in older raids, and there's definitely been a trend going forward that they've required flagging less and less. And there's an interesting argument to be had on both sides. And I understand both sides of the argument because it's a traditional argument that we see a lot in DDO, which is convenience versus immersion. You know, we see this with, say, the argument of having to run, should you have to run or not to quest through adventure areas. It's the same, essentially the same argument here. So, why do they require flagging in the first place? Well, from my perspective, there's a couple reasons. The first and main reason is storyline reason. So, for example, the Curse of Strahd, we'll go back to that. Does it make sense for your character to be fighting Strahd when your character has, as an adventurer, has not gone through all the prior quests which lead up to this final conflict? No, not really. For the most part, if you're just talking about a character in their experiences, it doesn't really make sense to take on Strahd when you haven't gone through all the prior kind of conflicts to lead up to that. And generally with these quest packs, the storyline often begins with the regular quest and it leads up into a climax at the raid. Normally the raid, or if there's no raid, at least the capstone quest. So that's kind of the reason why flagging is required. I also think there's another reason in that flagging gives you a purpose to run certain quests. So say like heroic shroud flagging. There's not, I think there's a lot of people who would skip Coalescence Chamber otherwise if it wasn't required for flagging. So, and maybe some players will scoff at that and say, like, well, we shouldn't have to run the quest if we don't want to, because a lot of people don't like Coalescence Chamber. But at the same time, it gives you more reasons other than just XP and loot to run a quest at least once. And there was other things in the game like that, like first time XP requirements to run a quest first, but it's just another one of those things in game to incentivize you to run a variety of content. So I think those are the reasons for requiring it each life. And the reason it's required each life as opposed to once per account, something like that, or permanently, is because it's storyline wise, your character is going through these different quests. Each life is a new character, right? And every character is a different character. So just because your rogue has flagged doesn't mean your fighter is going to be flagged, because your fighter is not, as an adventurer, has not gone through all these steps. And you might hear these reasons and kind of throw it out and say, oh, that's ridiculous, it's just a game, we don't need to be so I guess tentacle about it, or be so focused on the storyline aspect. But it's another one of these things, right? So it's like the same argument as, do we run through adventure areas or not? It's immersion versus convenience. How far do you go with convenience? Because there has to be a balance there. You can't just go totally for convenience in all respects when it comes to DDO, or else it becomes less of a kind of a D&D experience, I would say. So yeah, so that's the pro argument. Now to get into the con argument, which is a couple things. I mean, I think the best argument against is that there's the population is smaller and we should remove flagging, because all flagging does is gate people out of content and prevents people from grouping. There's also the convenience argument that it's just more convenient. But I think the main one and the best argument is it just gates people off from playing with each other, and we want to encourage that as much as possible. So that is a really good argument. So I understand both sides here. I think this is a spot where, like adventure areas, the best thing they can do is have a compromise. So I see no issue with requiring just regular quests be completed to flag. I certainly think they can go too far. So really, really challenging quests shouldn't be required. So it was a really good thing back years ago. I think it was update 17 when they took the requirement to run the Crucible to flag for Reaver's Fade Away. So that's a good thing. Like a quest like the Crucible should not be required. For those of you all who don't know about the Crucible, it's a really challenging quest that requires a lot of group coordination. You technically can solo it, but it's really hard to solo. Also, just the whole thing's really hard. It requires certain roles, like you want like a monk type to do the swimming part. You need to really the puzzle is really difficult, especially if you don't know it. Figuring out for the first time is quite difficult. Maze portion, so requiring really difficult quests like that shouldn't be a thing. I also think that there's certain flagging requirements, like the heroic abbot requirements to do the signal frame and the 4 different paths. I think that's just way too much. So I think that the best thing we can do here is kind of meet in the middle and just require the quest once. I don't think that's too big of a deal, assuming they're all normal quests that support solo play and they aren't crazy, quests that are too crazy with puzzles. And if they do have a quest that's crazy like the Crucible with puzzles and group coordination, they should probably not require that as part of the flagging process. So that's where I generally sit on it. I'm okay with it. The reason this topic, I'm okay with it generally, but the reason this topic was brought up was because I think it's because the new raid, the Dryad and the Demigod, does not require any flagging, which I was surprised. So you can actually run Dryad and the Demigod even if you haven't run any of the Feywild quests. So some players are going to like that. Some players are going to find that a little weird. I personally find it a little weird just because on that storyline, Fearsome is, he's the main villain of the pack. It seems really weird if you've paid attention to the storyline. To me, it doesn't really make any sense to be able to jump into the raid immediately, since there's a lot of steps along the way that lead up to this final confrontation with Fearsome, which if you've read the storyline throughout Feywild quest, you would understand what all those are. So for me, it's weird. I guess you could justify it from the storyline or role playing wise perspective. If you were to say, "Hey, my character hasn't done it, but these people I'm grouping with have kind of gone through this experience, and I'm just tagging along for the ride." So my character is, like a mercenary or whatever. He's just coming here, out of the blue to, I guess, to join in with these other people. So other characters. So I guess it could make sense. That could make sense from a storyline perspective if you want to take that argument with it. But at the same time, when you do talk to the quest giver, you are kind of walking through the story. So I don't know. It's I guess you could make some storyline argument, but I think generally it's okay to require flagging. So I was expecting them to require it, and I think it would have been okay if they required you to run the Feywild quest once, you run Dryad and the Demigod, but they didn't, and I'm sure some of you will like that. So guys, that's going to be it for this topic. I thought it'd be interesting to just kind of give my little spiel here on flagging. Would be interested in seeing what you all think. That's going to be it for this video. Hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time. Have a good one. Take care.